A BB40 and straight black pride, brothers and sisters. This is your brother, DC Radical 1, with episode 6 of DC's Radical Thoughts. And today's episode is entitled, No Good Deed Shall Go Unpunished. And this episode was sparked by an interview I saw, just so happened to catch, with Tyrone Hayes. For those unfamiliar, Tyrone Hayes was the scientist who was commissioned to study atrazine, and he was the one that discovered the ill effects of the chemical. He tested it on frogs, and it was shown to be an endocrine disruptor and showing to cause mutations in the frogs that cause the effeminization of the male frogs and eventually the masculinization of the female frogs. And so he, like a good scientist should, he went and in essence researched his own research, tested amongst other animals, and came to the conclusion that atrazine was detrimental to multiple species. What I'll probably end up doing is doing a full video if I can actually find a copy of the recent article. But the reason that this episode is titled No Good Deed Shall Go Unpunished is because one, when I looked at his whole story, that's the thought that came to mind. And that is a European proverb. And once you study African proverbs, then you start thinking about sayings that whites in America have, with just you think of them as American sayings, but when you study African proverbs, you realize, okay, these are European proverbs. And I remember hearing when I was young, the European proverb, or the American proverb, if you will, that no good deed shall go unpunished. And the interesting thing about it is, if that is the case, and it's a proverb, and proverbs are rooted in truth even in European society, then that means that the inverse is true, that bad deeds shall be rewarded, right? Now, I think we can look at times throughout society where people have stolen massive amounts of money. People have, you had the government officials involved in assassinations of foreign leaders, and corporations involved in assassinations of people, and people scamming people out of millions of dollars and things of that nature, right? And the reality of the situation is that the person who robs the liquor store is much more likely to get more time than the person that robs the Federal Reserve. You know what I'm saying? So, that's what I thought about when I saw Tyrone Hayes' story, because I remember seeing it years ago, and it may have been Brother Genie in his Effeminization Part 2 lecture that brought the story to my attention. And I saw the interview he did on, I believe it was Democracy Now! At the time, where he told about his research, and he brought forth the evidence and things like that. And so when I looked at this interview, they gave the background and everything, how he got commissioned to do the work, and his methodology and how he came to his conclusions and how they reacted. And the thing about it is, you would think on the surface that if someone discovers that a chemical is dangerous and that it shouldn't be used, and it has harmful effects on the environment and harmful effects on animals, and possibly harmful effects on people. And in this case, atrazine was literally being sprayed on food at the time. And so he was sounding the alarm. And you would think that this person would be lauded as a hero, and they would achieve higher levels of success and given accolades for their professional work, and maybe even become like known mainstream wise, like Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's his name. If not, apologize for butchering his name. But somebody like that guy is now the science guy. So you would think Tyrone Hayes is doing this and making this discovery, that maybe he would get achievements like that and accolades and be lauded and whatnot. But of course, the title of this episode is "No Good Deed Shall Go Unpunished," and in reality, the exact opposite of everything I said he should receive is what happened. He was vilified in the scientific community. They attempted to assassinate his character. They attempted to disprove his work. They had people research the research that he researched. There people that redid the experiments. And some of the people redid and came up with the same results. So they got people after those people that come up and research the research of the research, if you will, and then come up with contradictory findings to what he, Mr. Hayes, had found and others had found. And so he describes being harassed, and he describes being literally like made fun of and disrespected, and just all the types of things that are the opposite of what he should receive. And it's so interesting because in a way you would think that his story would be a story that would like not only make the news, but somebody would come around and make a movie about it and hype it up and everything. Because back in the 90s, this was like almost a genre of film. You had and I cannot think of the name of the movie, but I can't think of the name. But anyway, there was a movie where this woman, she was out in the middle of somewhere in middle America, and had found that this major corporation was poisoning the water of this local community, and she went and researched it and got scientists and got lawyers and went to sue the people and all this stuff. It was a big movie back in the 90s, and it was based on a real person. And then you had other movies like I think there's a movie with Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington, some type of similar scenario with lawyers or something trying to silence her. Like even the Will Smith movie. I can't think of the name of any of these movies. Will Smith, and he was a lawyer. Yeah, he was a lawyer in Washington D.C. and some type of way he got caught up in this espionage thing, and the government was harassing him, and he had a former CIA agent helping him to survive and things like that. So yeah, so the point being, that was like a theme of some 90s movies back in the day, and Tyrone Hayes' story would realistically fit in with that. But in this case, the villains were doing their best. He didn't mention any assassination attempts, but assassination of his character, yeah. Attempted assassination of his career, yeah. Attempt to invalidate his research and invalidate his scholarship, yeah. And it's so interesting because Tyrone Hayes is a black man, and you don't often, we don't really see black scientists. And I just think it's ironic that a black scientist would be the one to find and expose a chemical from a major manufacturer, expose it as being an feminization agent. And like I said, I'm gonna probably do a separate video on the interview, but one aspect of the interview that I found fascinating was that, and this person I take as a serious journalist. I've seen other stuff they've done, and she asked legitimate questions, and it's so interesting because I remember that years ago the Tyrone Hayes story was kind of treated kind of like conspiracy theory. So to see him on ABC, an ABC station, and because I do remember that it was ABC, but to see him on an ABC station and being interviewed on a Sunday morning and have the person apparently take his story as a legitimate story and ask intelligent questions and allow him to express himself and give the details on the things that went on, I was actually kind of caught off guard. Like, actually turning on the TV and seeing him, I was totally caught off guard because I recognized him immediately. And I was like, wait a minute, ain't that Tyrone Hayes? And they were like, yeah, we're going to interview Tyrone Hayes. And I'm like, really? And so I just stopped right there and watched it. And, it's so wild how so many things that were quote unquote conspiracy theory, or things that weren't really relevant, or things that didn't matter, when Brother Genie was talking about the feminization of the black male, and was talking about when he showed the information on the I believe it's the U.S. Army. I don't believe it's CIA. I believe it's the U.S. Army, with the concept of the gay bomb, and the State Department, studying how to make Kenyan males less masculine, and the Tyrone Hayes story, and how we really, Janie, for putting out this information and emphasizing this assault, this attack on masculinity. You know how a lot of people, a lot of people, vilified him and accused him of all types of stuff, and talking about why is he obsessed with this stuff, and so forth and so on. And now all of a sudden everyone's an expert on the feminization. Everyone's an expert. People got documentaries on buck breaking and all this stuff going on. But at the time, the person who really brought it into the 21st century, as Dr. Wilson really brought it to the end of the 20th century, and no one wanted to hear it, and we had more important things to attend to. We had bigger issues in the community, and so forth and so on. And so it just goes to show that whether you're a scientist or a journalist or a scholar or just a regular person who has some information or does some investigation, or really just trying to do something positive, the European proverb that no good deed shall go unpunished is really standard operating procedure. And we think about all the black people who fought for us in the 60s. We still have black political prisoners from the 1960s and 1970s. We're talking about people who were in their early 20s, who are now in their 70s, who were fighting for the liberation of black people. They were fighting for black people to be treated with dignity and respect, and to have some modicum of power over their lives, and some form, and to receive some form of justice, and to just be, as Malcolm X say, be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day. And they've been locked away for it. Some people have been locked away for things they didn't even do. They were set up by the government. We know for a fact now that they didn't know then that the FBI was targeting black people in black organizations that were doing stuff for black people. This is a known fact. And yet we still have people who've been locked up for not years, but for decades for doing the right thing. And it just goes to show that no good deed shall go unpunished. We have a brother, major supporter, who, and I don't know how much of his case I can discuss, but he was defending his family. Now he has legal matters to attend to for defending his family. So again, no good deed shall go unpunished. And so one thing that black people really have to realize is, you know what? No. You know what I realized just now as I'm talking? Many black people already understand this fact. And that's why many black people don't want to get involved, don't want to know the truth, don't want to organize, don't want to help the black people who are doing something, because they understand this fact that no good deed will go unpunished. And they, as a young people, who say they don't want any smoke with the quote unquote powers that be. They understand it. I understand it now, but I just choose to continue to do what I do. But it is a reality that not just black people have to deal with, because there's been white people. I mean, let's not forget Gary Webb, the reporter in California. They came out with the Dark Alliance series and the Dark Alliance book that exposed CIA drug trafficking in America. CIA operatives, not agents, but operatives, bringing in drugs from, I believe, Nicaragua, but definitely Central and South America, and bringing them into America. He exposed that operation. He named the names. He named Danilo Blandone and others. He interviewed Ricky Ross, and he exposed this. And then other people, including like former police officers, they co-signed what he said, and they verified what he said. And with all that, you would think that Gary Webb would be like the biggest journalist on the planet, and would be given a spot on 60 Minutes back in the day, because 60 Minutes was a big thing, or given his own, or being the head of a newspaper, or whatever accolade and whatever position he could get based upon his professional merits. But instead, Gary Webb had some of his own editors and publishers turned on him, and they went and tried to disprove the things that he had proven, which he had documented fully. Like, there was no way to disprove the information that he put out, but they still went and tried to disprove it and claim it was conspiracy theory and all the standard things. And then next thing you know, Gary Webb allegedly committed suicide by shooting himself in the head twice. Just take all the time you need to process what I just said, right? And I mean, the Gary Webb story is literally the biggest modern example that I can think of in the last, I guess, 30 years of no good deed going unpunished. Gary Webb proved what black people suspected for years. In fact, going all the way back to Vietnam and the smuggling heroin in the bodies of the dead GIs and in their coffins and all this stuff. That's an operation that was going on. I was looking at a old interview with Ted Gunderson, and he was talking about that and talking about a boatload of other things. And out of everyone involved, man, I can't even think of his name, but the drug dealer in New York, Frank. Anyway, he got arrested, even though he had crooked cops, and you had crooked cops, the government, the U.S. Army, everybody involved in that operation. And the black guy gets all the time because he basically becomes on their radar because he showed up for the fight between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. He showed up in a meek, and that's what put him on somebody's radar. Not that he was doing good deeds, but because he was spreading drugs in the community, but he became, in essence, the fall guy and the person who was known for spreading heroin into the community, when we know it was a much bigger operation than a few black guys in New York and North Carolina could pull off. Especially you talking about international drug trade in the 1960s, right? So, man, that interview just sparked those thoughts, or these thoughts. And I just want to say, we have to thank and appreciate people like Tyrone Hayes and people who are whistleblowers, and somebody like Edward Snowden, who just exposed the whole surveillance state, just doing his job and looking around and like, wait a minute, this stuff is crazy, and letting people know. And Gary Webb, and there's been other people through the years that have exposed stuff. And the thing about it is that, like, he's going all the way back, and I can't remember the brother's name. There was a brother who was doing security at the Watergate, with the Watergate break-in, and he was never lauded as a hero, even though he exposed government corruption that led to the downfall of a president of the United States. And it's not like he got to, it was the 70s, so it's not like, as far as I know anyway, he didn't get to go on Johnny Carson and write a book and have a movie and receive all this money and accolades and thanks and glory and all that. As far as I know, none of that took place, right? So it goes to show in this society that European proverb is accurate. No good deed shall go unpunished. With that, brothers and sisters, I thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is your brother DC Radical 1. With that, I say a BB for ODA and straight black pride.